Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something that is profoundly impactful and, honestly, incredibly relevant to all of our futures. The innovations we're exploring today are doing way more than just adding a little convenience to our lives. They are actively dismantling long-standing barriers for disabled Americans. We're going to set a really empowering tone right from the jump, because what we're looking at is genuinely revolutionizing independence, breaking down literal walls in the physical world, and completely redefining how we interact in the digital workspace.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at redefining independence through technology. Then, we're going to explore advancing physical mobility, followed by empowering neurodivergent professionals. After that, we'll tackle the AI double-edged sword. And finally, we'll wrap things up with a universal design solution.
All right, part one, redefining independence through technology.
So when we talk about technological innovation for disabled Americans, we have to understand that this isn't just a nice-to-have perk. It is fundamentally a matter of civil rights. Let's make sure we're on the same page with our vocabulary here. On one side, you have assistive technology. These are specific devices or software meant to improve functional capabilities for a person with a disability. Think of a screen reader or a highly customized wheelchair. But then on the other side, we have universal design. This is the whole philosophy of designing products and environments from day one so that they can be used by everyone to the greatest extent possible. And this isn't a new concept. This vocabulary is deeply rooted in historic civil rights legislation, like the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those laws set the baseline expectation for accessibility, and modern tech is finally catching up to fulfill that promise.
Let's move to part two, advancing physical mobility.
The built environment has historically thrown up some massive physical barriers, right? But hardware like the standing wheelchair you see here is an absolute game changer. This is a mechanized device that literally assists the user in moving from a seated position to a fully standing one. And it's not just about the convenience of reaching a high shelf or being able to chat with someone face-to-face at eye level, though those things are huge for independence. Clinical studies actually show that this kind of passive standing provides massive health benefits. We're talking improved circulation, higher bone density, and a much lower risk of skeletal deformation. So it's hardware that is actively improving long-term health and well-being.
And we're seeing this concept of universal design transforming everyday life in highly practical ways. Just imagine waking up and using the LiftWare Steady, a utensil that electronically cancels out 70% of hand tremors so you can eat completely independently. Then you head out and you use the PathView app to navigate around crowdsourced sidewalk obstacles. Need to catch a bus? RouteMe2 helps you seamlessly board complex public transit using cloud-integrated sensors. And when you finally get home after a long day, your iRobot Roomba has already autonomously mapped and cleaned the floors. It saves you the physical labor, and honestly, it just lets you relax.
Okay, part three, empowering neurodivergent professionals.
Let's pivot from the physical world to the digital workplace, where we're seeing a fundamentally different approach to software. Take a look at these three apps, which were designed specifically with neurodivergent adults in mind. First, there's Evro, which gives private, real-time communication feedback to improve meeting clarity and cut down on social ambiguity. Then you've got Morgan, which visually blocks out time across multiple calendars to take the abstract concept of time and make it concrete. And Goblin.Tools uses AI to take massive, overwhelming projects and break them down into tiny, actionable steps. Now, the crucial takeaway here is that these tools are not trying to fix a person with ADHD or autism, not at all. Instead, they adapt the digital environment by drastically reducing cognitive load and executive friction.
I really want you to take a second and consider this. Just imagine trying to navigate digital friction without tools designed for your specific brain. Think about your own digital workplace for a moment. Think about the sheer mental energy required to constantly context shift, manage unspoken expectations in endless meetings, and juggle a dozen different Slack channels or email threads. For neurodivergent professionals, the actual work is rarely the problem. It's the invisible coordination around the work that completely drains your energy. Providing the right digital tools isn't just a perk, it's an absolute necessity for an equitable workplace.
Which brings us to part four, the AI double-edged sword.
Now, our technology story isn't a pure utopia. We have to introduce a pretty significant plot twist here. While artificial intelligence can be an incredible assistive tool, its reliance on statistical averages presents a severe algorithmic danger. Think about artificial general intelligence, or AGI. AGI optimizes for the average user,
But because disabled people have incredibly diverse needs and are often statistical outliers, AGI inherently marginalizes them. Contrast that with artificial specific intelligence, or ASI. These are domain-targeted systems. The New York City Bar Association actually found that while generalized AI often hurts outliers, specific models actively empower them. A great example is Google's Project Relate, which lets people with non-standard speech train their very own custom speech recognizer.
Let's look a little closer at the AI generative bias risks that legal and tech researchers have reported. Because these models are trained on historical data, they often just spit back the internet's absolute worst stereotypes. Reports show AI frequently generates medicalized tragedy tropes or objectifying inspiration porn when you ask it to depict disabled people. There's also this stark homogeneous representation. In one test, asking an AI for images of autistic people resulted almost entirely in pictures of white men. But beyond visual misrepresentation, we're talking about severe, real-world consequences. When these biased predictive models are used for things like employment screening or credit lending, they can actively and unfairly exclude disabled Americans from fundamental economic opportunities.
All of this leads us to a highly provocative question. How do we build systems that see disabled people authentically? If the technology that we are increasingly relying on is structurally biased against the exact populations who rely on it for accessibility, well, we have a really serious problem. We can't just cross our fingers and hope the algorithm fixes itself. We need real structural solutions.
And that leads perfectly into Part 5, the Universal Design Solution.
To actually fix this and create an AI ecosystem that includes everyone, experts are championing a few highly actionable steps. First up, we have to mandate the inclusion of accessibility data in AI training sets, so disabled experiences aren't just treated as statistical errors. From there, we need standardized accessibility benchmarks for AI, kind of like the WCAG guidelines we already use for websites. We also need ongoing community-led testing to catch emerging harms early on. And finally, for high-stakes decisions, institutions absolutely must guarantee human-centric alternatives. Accessibility has to be a foundational feature from day one. It cannot be a patch applied after the damage is already done.
Nothing about us without us. If you are familiar with the disability rights movement, you know this historic mantra, and it perfectly encapsulates our core lesson today. Equitable technology simply cannot be achieved without the direct, rigorous inclusion of disabled individuals in its ideation, development, and deployment.
We'll wrap things up with this vital proposal from the National Council on Disability: adopt a technology bill of rights for people with disabilities. As we accelerate into an increasingly automated future, we all have to ask ourselves a question. Are we going to allow technology to quietly build new, invisible walls? Or will we intentionally ensure it remains the ultimate tool for universal empowerment? The choice entirely comes down to how we design it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.